There is a combination of forces that can hollow out a state faster than almost anything else. Not one or the other. Both at once. A population getting older means fewer workers, more retirees, more people drawing on services instead of funding them. A population getting poorer means fewer tax dollars, fewer businesses, fewer young people who can afford to stay. Put those two things together and you do not get a manageable challenge. You get a structural condition that compounds every year and becomes harder to reverse with each cycle. We are ranking 10 states where both things are happening simultaneously, not states that are old but rich, not states that are poor but young. The states where median age is above or converging on the national average, where the poverty rate sits well above the national figure, where the median household income is significantly below the national median, and where those two curves are feeding each other in a loop that no single policy is positioned to break. The national median household income in 2024 was $81,604. The national poverty rate was 12.1%. Every state on this list is significantly below the income figure and significantly above the poverty rate. Subscribe now, because number 1 on this list has held the bottom position in median household income for years, has a life expectancy below the national average, and is aging at a pace its own economists describe as structurally irreversible. Let's count it down. Number 10, South Carolina. Sun, retirees, and a poverty rate the Tourism Board prefers not to mention. South Carolina's median age in 2024 was 40.7 years, above the national average of 39.2 and rising. The state's median household income was $72,350, about 11% below the national median. The poverty rate was 13.3%, above the national average of 12.1. South Carolina is a state with two faces that barely speak to each other. The coastal strip, Charleston, Hilton Head, Myrtle Beach, attracts retirees from the Northeast, remote workers priced out of larger markets, and tourist dollars that keep the hospitality economy moving. Inland South Carolina is a different place. Former textile communities where the mills closed in the 90s. Rural counties where the hospital closed more recently. Median household income in some areas that falls below $50,000. The retiree influx is pushing the median age up in coastal counties. The poverty in inland counties is pulling the income floor down. Neither trend is offsetting the other. They are coexisting, and the gap between them is widening. South Carolina's share of residents over 65 grew faster between 2020 and 2024 than almost any other state in the South. The Census Bureau confirmed that the Hilton Head and Myrtle Beach metro areas recorded the largest median age increases in the entire country between 2020 and 2024. What grew with that aging population was demand for services, healthcare, elder care, transportation, that a state with below-average tax revenues cannot easily scale. Living in South Carolina is like being in a house where one wing is getting a renovation funded by outside money and the other wing has not seen maintenance since 1994. The house is technically fine, depending on which wing you live in. The Census Bureau's own migration data says the rest. Young people leave inland South Carolina at rates that exceed the national average for rural outmigration. The ones who stay are older every year. There is nothing in the County Lee-Vell economic data to suggest that trend is reversing. Number 9, Oklahoma. Energy boom. Bust, repeat. Meanwhile, the rural counties are getting older and the bills are getting larger. Oklahoma's statewide median age in 2024 was 37.4 years, below the national average. But that number conceals the story this state actually has to tell. Oklahoma's rural counties, the Panhandle, the Eastern Mountain Districts, the agricultural plains, have median ages pushing well into the 40s, poverty rates above 20%, and no economic engine capable of reversing either. The state's median household income was $66,148, nearly 19% below the national median. The poverty rate was 14.9%. Oklahoma is a state built around boom and bust energy cycles. When oil prices are high, money flows. When they crash, the structural weakness of an economy without a plan B becomes visible immediately. The last decade has not been kind to Oklahoma's economic diversification agenda, which essentially did not exist. Oklahoma was one of the last states to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, doing so in 2021, only after a ballot initiative forced the legislature's hand. For years before that, working-age Oklahomans fell into a coverage gap that older, poorer residents in rural counties felt hardest. Oklahoma consistently ranks in the bottom tier nationally for life expectancy. The aging that matters in Oklahoma is not the statewide average. It is the age structure of the counties the economy forgot, places where the median resident is already past 50, the last doctor retired, and the nearest emergency room is an hour away. Living in Oklahoma is like running a business on a revenue model that only works when the commodity price cooperates, knowing it will not always cooperate, and not making a backup plan because the last boom was too good to think clearly about the bust. The Census Bureau's county-level population estimates show exactly where those people went, out of state mostly. To Texas, Colorado, Kansas, places with a broader economic base and a labor market that does not depend on a commodity price nobody in the county controls. Number 8, Alabama, cheap to live in, nearly impossible to get sick in without coverage, getting older either way. Alabama's median age in 2024 was 39.6 years, just above the national average and climbing. The state's median household income was $66,659, about 18% below the national median. The poverty rate was 15.2%, nearly a quarter above the national average. Alabama has legitimate industrial assets, auto manufacturing, aerospace, a growing port economy in Mobile, and a rural interior that those assets have not reached. The Black Belt counties of central Alabama, named for their dark, fertile soil, have some of the highest poverty rates in the country. In these counties, the combination of poverty, aging, and geographic isolation creates conditions that are difficult to exaggerate and easy to ignore from a distance. Alabama has never expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. As of today, it remains one of 10 states that have not done so, leaving nearly 300,000 working-age Alabamians in a coverage gap, too poor to afford private insurance, too young for Medicare, and ineligible under the state's bare-bones Medicaid rules, which restrict coverage to children, the elderly, and people with disabilities. For an aging population in rural counties, that gap is not a policy abstraction. It is the reason people skip appointments, delay diagnoses, and arrive at emergency rooms when it is already late. Alabama's 65 and older population grew by nearly 14% between 2020 and 2024. The state's ability to absorb that growth with its current fiscal structure and healthcare safety net has not kept pace. Living in Alabama is like owning land with genuine value underneath it that you cannot access because the equipment needed to reach it has not been maintained and no one agreed on who was responsible for fixing it. The numbers from the Alabama Department of Public Health say what the coverage gap produces. Preventable hospitalizations running above the national rate. Chronic disease diagnoses at ages that suggest years of untreated conditions catching up with people at once. A 65-year-old who has not had consistent health care for 20 years does not arrive at Medicare in good health. They arrive with the accumulated cost of what went unaddressed. Number 7. Arkansas. Chronically underpaid, chronically overlooked, and aging into that combination faster than the statewide numbers suggest. Arkansas's statewide median age in 2024 was 38.8 years, just below the national average. But in the rural counties of the Ozarks and the Delta, where the story of this state actually lives, the median age is well above 40 and climbing. The state's median household income was $62,106, among the bottom 5 nationally. The poverty rate was 15.3%. Arkansas does not have the collapse narrative of Appalachia or the storm damage story of Louisiana. It has something quieter and harder to dramatize. A chronic, low-grade economic underperformance that has persisted across administrations, economic cycles, and policy regimes. The state has always hovered near the bottom. It remains there. What is changing is the age of the population carrying that underperformance in its rural counties. Young people leave for Little Rock, Dallas, or Nashville. What remains skews older, and those older residents are navigating a healthcare system that has contracted significantly. 11 Arkansas counties lost their only hospital in the past decade. Not their best hospital, their only one. When a 68-year-old without a hospital in the county needs emergency care, the drive time becomes a clinical variable. Arkansas has one of the highest rates of diabetes in the country, one of the highest rates of heart disease, one of the highest rates of preventable deaths, and a median household income that leaves a growing share of older residents choosing between prescriptions and groceries. Living in Arkansas is like trying to drive a long route on a highway where the exits are closing faster than new ones are being built. You can get from one end to the other. It just keeps getting harder. The Arkansas Center for Health Improvement has documented what happens when that infrastructure disappears. Older residents in rural counties report skipping medications, delaying procedures, and choosing between healthcare costs and basic household expenses at rates significantly above the national average. That is not a policy abstraction. That is the arithmetic of what rural poverty and rural hospital closures produce in combination. Number 6. Kentucky. The opioid crisis never ended. The workforce never recovered. The counties are getting older. Kentucky's median age in 2024 was 39.3 years, essentially at the national average. What pulls Kentucky onto this list is not its statewide median, but the demographic collapse in its eastern counties and a poverty rate that has remained consistently above the national average for a generation. The state's median household income was $64,526. The poverty rate was 15.6%, nearly one-third above the national average. Kentucky's story has been defined for a generation by the collapse of coal in the eastern part of the state and the opioid epidemic that filled the void. The opioid crisis in Kentucky was not a moral failure. It was the predictable outcome of chronic unemployment, physical pain from extractive labor, and a pharmaceutical industry that flooded medically underserved communities with highly addictive products. The crisis removed working-age adults from the workforce permanently, through addiction, disability, and death. It left behind communities that are older, smaller, and without the workforce to support the people remaining. Kentucky's labor force participation rate remains below the national average. The eastern counties, Letcher, Knott, Leslie, Pike, have median ages pushing into the low 40s and household incomes well below the state average. The state average is already near the bottom nationally. By 2030, Kentucky's 65 and older population is projected to exceed 20% of the state total. The workers needed to support that population in taxes and labor are leaving. Many of them left a decade ago. Living in Kentucky is like inheriting a house with a beautiful view and serious foundation damage. The view is real, the damage is real, and fixing one does not reduce the other. The WVU Bureau of Business and Economic Research documents exactly that sequence in its annual Outlook reports. Coal employment collapsed. Young workers followed the jobs to other states. What remained was an older, less mobile population in counties with shrinking tax bases and growing healthcare burdens. The Bureau describes eastern Kentucky's demographic situation as one of the most structurally constrained in the Appalachian region, a phrase economists use when the math has already made the decision for the policy. We are halfway through. The 5 states ahead are where the older and poorer dynamic is most advanced, most structural, and in most cases, the most resistant to easy solutions. Subscribe if you have not already. Number 1 has held the dead last position in median household income among all 50 states for years running. Keep watching. Number 5, Louisiana. Culturally rich, fiscally fragile, aging into a healthcare system that cannot keep up. Louisiana's statewide median age in 2024 was 38.3 years. That figure is below the national average for the same reason Oklahoma's and Arkansas's are. The state has enough younger residents in its urban parishes to pull the statewide number down. What it obscures is the trajectory of rural parishes, North Louisiana, the Cajun Prairie, the Delta Lowlands, where the median age is pushing into the mid-40s and the economic structure has essentially collapsed. The state's median household income was $60,986. The poverty rate was 18.7%, the highest in the country after Mississippi. The parishes outside New Orleans and Baton Rouge are aging fast and poor by any measure. In many of these parishes, the major employers are the hospital system and the school district. When healthcare consolidates, the hospital closes. When school enrollment shrinks, the school closes. What is left is older, poorer, and more isolated. Louisiana has one of the highest rates of uninsured residents in the country, one of the highest infant mortality rates, one of the lowest life expectancies, and a state fiscal structure dependent on volatile oil and gas revenues that cannot consistently fund the services an aging, low-income population requires. Living in Louisiana is like living in a house with extraordinary character, a leaking roof, and a landlord who keeps saying the repair is scheduled while the water damage spreads. The Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development's own rural transit gap reports make the stakes concrete. Dozens of rural parishes have zero public transit options. In those parishes, a senior resident without a car and without a pharmacy nearby is not a demographic statistic. They are the person who does not get the prescription filled, who misses the follow-up appointment, who ends up in an emergency room at a cost that the parish and the state absorb long after the budget meeting where the transit line got cut. Number 4. New Mexico. High poverty, rising age in the counties that count. A healthcare desert expanding faster than anyone is fixing it. New Mexico's statewide median age in 2024 was 38.3 years, below the national average, like several states on this list. The pattern is the same, an urban core in Albuquerque and Santa Fe that keeps the statewide figure down, while the rural counties, the southeastern oil country, the northern Rio Grande corridor, the tribal lands, are aging fast and receiving nothing like the services that aging requires. The state's median household income was approximately $63,000. The poverty rate was 18.1%, third highest in the country. New Mexico has one of the highest concentrations of Native American residents of any state, and the poverty rate in tribal communities significantly exceeds the already elevated statewide figure. It has some of the most rural counties by geography of any state in the continental United States. And its healthcare system, outside the two main cities, is thinning out precisely as the population that needs it most gets older. New Mexico has one of the highest drug overdose death rates in the country, one of the highest rates of food insecurity, and income growth over the past decade has been among the slowest of any state, making structural catch-up arithmetically difficult. The state's oil and gas revenues have cushioned the budget in recent years. That cushion masks the underlying fragility. When commodity prices fall, the revenue falls with them. The aging and the poverty remain regardless. Living in New Mexico is like surviving on an investment that pays in boom years and nothing in bust years, while the invoices for healthcare, infrastructure, and elder services keep arriving on a fixed schedule. New Mexico's own Aging and Long-Term Services Department has published that conclusion in its annual needs assessments. The 65 and older population in rural counties is growing faster than the care infrastructure serving it. Home care worker shortages are classified as critical in 14 of the state's 33 counties. The department describes the gap as widening, not closing, a bureaucratic phrase for a situation where the math is moving in the wrong direction and the resources to reverse it are not currently in the budget. Number 3. Mississippi. Last in household income, last in health outcomes, adding an aging population to a system already at its limit. Mississippi's statewide median age in 2024 was 38.1 years, below the national average. This is the number that surprises people. Mississippi is not an old state by median age. It is a poor state whose older population is growing faster than its economy can absorb in a healthcare system that was already at its limit before the demographic shift arrived. The state's median household income was $59,127, the lowest of any state in the country. The poverty rate was 19.3%, the highest in the country. Mississippi is last, not almost last, not occasionally last. It has held the bottom position for median household income for more than a decade, and the poverty rate has been among the top 2 or 3 states nationally for longer than that. Mississippi's 65 and older population grew by more than 12% between 2020 and 2024. Deaths exceeded births in several of its rural counties. The young people who can leave are leaving. The people remaining are older and poorer than the people who were there before them. Mississippi has the highest rate of chronic disease in the country, the highest rate of obesity, one of the highest rates of diabetes. A healthcare coverage gap that an aging population with those underlying conditions cannot afford, and which the state has shown no consistent willingness to close. Living in Mississippi is like being handed a structural problem that predates you by a century and being asked to solve it with the resources of a state that has been at the bottom of every relevant economic ranking for the entire time anyone has been measuring. Adrienne Hudson, who runs RISE, a nonprofit working to address the teacher shortage in the Mississippi Delta, has described the structural problem in terms the enrollment data confirms. Everything we want to do to thrive as a region starts with improving our schools, she told the Walton Family Foundation in a published interview. And the schools cannot improve without teachers. And the teachers cannot come if there are no jobs in the community to keep the families that produce the next generation of teachers. The Mississippi Department of Education's 2024 Educator Shortage Survey found nearly 5,160 vacancies statewide, with the Delta, as always, bearing the largest share. Number 2, West Virginia. The oldest of the poor and the poorest of the old, has been for a while, getting more so every year. West Virginia's median age in 2024 was 43 years, the second highest in the country, behind only Maine. The state's median household income was $60,798, second lowest in the country. The poverty rate was 16.7%, fourth highest. West Virginia does not appear on the older list and the poorer list as a coincidence. It dominates both because the same underlying event created both conditions simultaneously. The coal economy that built West Virginia extracted what it needed across the first half of the 20th century and then left. What it left behind was a population anchored to a geography by culture, family, and the absence of anywhere cheaper to go. The working-age population has been bleeding out for 70 years. Deaths have exceeded births in West Virginia consistently. The state has lost population in every census decade since 1950. Every decade, without exception. The opioid crisis compounded the damage. West Virginia's overdose death rate has been among the highest in the nation for over a decade, removing working-age adults from the workforce before they reached retirement and leaving the population older and thinner than any projection had anticipated. The state's labor force participation rate is the lowest in the country. The share of residents over 65 is nearly 22%. The median household income is $50 above Mississippi, the margin between second and last place among all 50 states. Living in West Virginia is like watching a slow leak in a boat that multiple generations have tried to patch, knowing the water is still coming in, and being the one who stayed because this is home, and home does not stop being home just because it is sinking. The West Virginia University Bureau of Business and Economic Research has been publishing that conclusion in its annual economic outlook for years. The state's structural economic deficiencies and underlying demographic challenges, in the Bureau's own language, are the primary limiting factors to growth, not insufficient effort, not bad luck. Structure. And the structure has been documented, analyzed, projected, and reported on for long enough that the distance between knowing what the problem is and having the political will to address it at the scale the problem requires has become the story itself. Number 1, Maine. The oldest state in America, aging faster than it can replace itself, and getting more expensive every year. Maine's statewide median age is around 45 years, the highest in the United States and well above the national average. The pattern is consistent. Small urban hubs like Portland and Bangor help stabilize the numbers slightly, while vast rural counties, especially in northern and eastern Maine, are aging rapidly with fewer services to support that shift. The state's median household income is roughly $70,000. The poverty rate sits near 11 to 12%, but rises significantly in rural and older communities where economic opportunities are limited. Maine has one of the most rural populations in the country, and that geography makes access to healthcare, transportation, and essential services increasingly difficult, particularly for older residents. Its healthcare system, especially outside major towns, is under strain as demand grows with the aging population. Heating costs in Maine are among the highest in the U.S. due to long, harsh winters. Energy expenses, combined with rising housing and healthcare costs, place sustained pressure on fixed-income households. The state continues to lose younger workers to faster-growing regions, reducing workforce participation and slowing economic growth. This outmigration accelerates the aging trend and shrinks the tax base needed to support public services. Maine's economy depends heavily on industries like tourism, fishing, and small-scale manufacturing, sectors that are often seasonal and lower-paying. Income growth has been steady but modest, making it difficult for many households to keep pace with rising costs. Living in Maine increasingly means managing a fixed or limited income while expenses, especially for healthcare, housing, and heating, rise steadily, year after year. State reports have highlighted growing concerns around elder care and workforce shortages. The population aged 65 and older is expanding faster than the infrastructure designed to support it. Shortages of healthcare workers and home care providers are becoming more common, particularly in rural areas. Officials describe the gap as widening, a sign that demand is increasing faster than the state's ability to respond. That is the most troubling number on this entire list. Not the poverty rate, not the median age, the pace at which these conditions have stopped being treated as emergencies by anyone positioned to address them. Every one of these states has people in it who are working hard, building things, trying to make a life in a place they love. The data is not a judgment of those people. It is a description of the structure they are working inside. And the structure is not neutral. Subscribe and check out the rest of the series. We have covered the counties, the cities, the towns, and the states where America's demographics are rewriting the future in real time. Thanks for watching.